Hello and welcome back to the Ricina Dialogue in partnership with First Post for day 2. Of course, our 3-day coverage continuing, and I have the pleasure of being joined by the Rwandan Foreign Minister, Olivier Nduhungirehe. Thank you ever so much for being here.
Thank you very much for having me.
How was your journey here? Of course, I know that there have been some difficulties, but did you make it here okay?
Yes, I made it through Addis Ababa. And I came on Monday because we have, before the Ricina Dialogue, we had a joint commission meeting with the government of India, which is a regular interaction between our two governments to talk about our bilateral cooperation.
Absolutely, and let's explore that bilateral cooperation first of all. Of course, the African continent and India, the partnership between nations within the African bloc and India has been growing. How do you see that partnership with Rwanda and India moving forward in the coming years?
It's an important partnership that we have. Actually, as we speak, India is the second largest investor in Rwanda with a little bit less than 500 billion US dollars. And we believe that this cooperation can grow further, especially in the areas where India has a comparative advantage, like manufacturing, like ICT and digital innovation. And those are sectors actually that are important also for Rwanda, because we have invested in digital literacy, in digital innovation, transformation, but also in manufacturing, because the issue that we have in Africa, you know, that it's always exporting raw materials and not adding values on the continent. So we believe that Indian companies can help us in that sector.
Absolutely. And looking at Rwanda's growth, it has been documented, of course, 7 to 8% growth year on year. What are the key drivers and key industries that are allowing Rwanda to grow into a real force in Africa?
The first sector of our GDP is services. We have invested in services, which requires, of course, to invest also in our people, in our youth, to have really a workforce that can drive this sector. But we have also invested in agriculture, especially in transformation, adding value, agro-processing. We have launched what we call Made in Rwanda, so that we process, we add value to our local products, so that we can export and reduce our deficit and trade deficit. So those we have also tourism, which is an important sector for our economy, but also the MICE industry, the meetings, incentives, conferences and events, and we are hosting many international events. We are now actually, Kigali is now the second city in Africa after Cape Town to host those conferences. So it's a whole economic ecosystem that we have put in place to bring investors, to bring tourists, and also to transform our products locally, so that we can be able to compete in this world that we live in.
And Foreign Minister, of course, your speciality and your key area of work is foreign diplomacy. I want to look at the foreign policy in connection with the growing economy and how those two go hand in hand.
Those are interlinked. Actually, for Rwanda, our focus is economic diplomacy. We know that we are a small, landlocked, developing country in the heart of Africa, but we need partnerships. We need, first of all, regional integration in our neighborhood, so that we can have free movement of people, of goods, services. But beyond that, beyond regional integration, even beyond continental integration through the African Union, we also need partnerships. We also need trade and investment. And in Rwanda, our philosophy is not to endlessly rely on development aid, which has been taking place on the continent following our independences 60 years ago. What we want is to transition from aid to trade, to be able to reform our economies, to reform our business environment, to attract investment, so that we can trade with our partners, including India and others, other countries in the world.
Fantastic. Of course, there are some regional tensions and have been for some time. We've recently seen that the US has decided to sanction top military officials. Can I just get your response to that after accusations, of course, of funding and supporting the M23 in the DRC?
This is a conflict that has been going on for many years, for more than 30 years. In 1994 in Rwanda, we had a genocide against the Tutsi. 1 million people were killed over 3 months, over a population of 7.5 million. So what we did in Rwanda was not to be held back by history or to be held hostage by grief and this tragedy. We decided to move on. We decided, first of all, to be united because that genocide usually leaves scars in the population. But we also decided to think big, to say that we will not just rebuild everything that was destroyed or repair everything that was damaged. We will think big. We will reform our economy. We will transform our way of living so that Rwanda is highly ranked in all economic rankings on Africa. We are always on top 3 on major rankings. So we did that on our territory. But the problem we have is that on the other side of the border, those who committed that genocide, the militia that was called Interahamwe, but also the army, they crossed the border. They were never disarmed by the UN that was on the ground. They were never disarmed by other foreign forces that were on the ground, but they were entertained. They were supported to the extent that, as we speak, they are integrated in the DRC army. And from DRC, they have been attacking Rwanda over the past 30 years on countless occasions. This is why Rwanda has deployed defensive measures along our border area in order to prevent us from those attacks. So we live in a situation where, on our side of the border, we are trying to move on. And then on the other side of the border, we have a militia that committed that genocide that is trying to destroy what we have achieved through a genocide ideology that's still going on in the region. So we were engaged in the Washington process with the DRC to address those security concerns. We have agreed last year on 27th of June on a peace agreement that includes a ceasefire, that includes a security component to address the situation, to neutralize that group that we are talking about so that Rwanda can lift its defensive measures. But instead of doing so, we witness on the ground an increase of air strikes, attacks by fighter jets and attack drones by the DRC government in violation of the ceasefire against that group of M23, AFC M23, but also against the Banyamulenge community, which is the Congolese of Rwandan culture and language. So, and then this has triggered a retaliation of the AFC M23 to the extent that when we signed in Washington, the Washington Accords on 4th of December, we were in the middle of a conflict. And we had warned actually the mediators and the international community that the situation on the ground was bad. But nonetheless, they insisted that we sign the agreement on 4th of December. And then after that, there was a city of Uvira, which was taken over by the FCM-23. Yes. And this triggered negative reactions by the US, also by other members of the international community. But this does not take into consideration the whole situation that we had been warning the international community about. But for us, we still believe in the Washington Accords. We believe also in a conclusion of the Doha agreements, because the Doha agreement is a more internal process between the AFCM-23, which is a Congolese movement, and also the government of Congo. So we are ready to continue supporting all stakeholders to achieve lasting peace.
Absolutely. Of course, following the US announcement, there has been backlash from Rwanda. Do you feel blindsided by the US, and do you think it's counterproductive in finding lasting peace?
It's of course counterproductive. Actually, those are not the first sanctions against Rwanda. In 2012, 2013, there were other sanctions during the first conflict of the M23. So there was a first conflict which ended in 2013 by a military solution. But the root causes of that conflict were never addressed. This is why this conflict came back 8 years later in October, November 2021. So the issue now should be to address the root causes so that we end this conflict once and for all. But for us, you know, in Rwanda in 1994, we suffered a terrible genocide. And when we hear genocide ideology, when we hear the same words that were used before the genocide, because the words like cockroaches or microbes referring to Tutsi are still used now in DRC, even by officials. So we take it very seriously, because what happened to us in 1994 will never happen again. We know how we suffered. We know that we live under existential threat by forces along our border, those militias, that militia that is now called FDLR, supported by the DRC government, but also by mercenaries. We have mercenaries on the ground, Colombian mercenaries, mercenaries from other countries. We also have Burundian forces. We have countless militias, the Wazalendo. This coalition of negative forces that has vowed to overthrow our government and maybe finish the job of 1994, we will never succeed. This is why we have deployed our defensive measures and still wish to protect our people and our borders.
Very quickly, because we are shorter on time, does more need to be done within the African community, with the African Union, to try and resolve this decades-long conflict? And is Donald Trump necessarily the right man to end this conflict?
But actually, when the conflict started, it was AU, African communities that took up the mediation. You remember the Nairobi process, which was a process of the East African community. There was also the Rwanda process, which is a process of the ICGLR that was led by the president of Angola. Unfortunately, those processes failed. They failed because for the Nairobi process, which was an internal dialogue between Congolese actors, the President Tshisekedi of Congo decided to expel the AM23 from the dialogue. And then he decided to expel also a peacekeeping force of the East African community, which was decided by leaders of the region. So, and then the Nairobi process was dead at that time. And then the Rwanda process also didn't succeed because President Tshisekedi refused to engage into dialogue with the M23. And then he went to ask the Emir of Qatar to mediate. It's the President Tshisekedi who asked the Emir of Qatar to enter this process. And then he went also to the US with his lobbies in Washington to try to offer the minerals of his country in order to bring Washington into the process, but not in mediation, but in fightings, in ensuring that they help the Congolese army fighting the AFC-M23 and fighting Rwanda. But the US took another position, which was to ensure that all parties negotiate a peaceful solution, what we did. And then the African Union is now coming back. There is an African-led mediation of a president of the Togolese Council, Faure Gnassingbe, with 5 facilitators, all former heads of state. And we believe that now it's time in 2026 to ensure that the African Union helps in implementing the current processes. We don't need another process. We have the Washington Accords, we have the Doha Framework Agreement. We don't need other agreements because those are comprehensive enough. But we need the AU to step up to really help in implementing the process. because maybe we have too many conflicts in the world, and maybe the United States and Qatar may have attention elsewhere.
Absolutely, of course, lots going on. Foreign Minister, thank you ever so much for providing insights and also explaining more about Rwandan foreign policy and also the growth within the country. Thank you.
Thank you very much for inviting me.